Our public officials, elected representatives, and business leaders could all be guilty of crimes against humanity. And it's up to us to decide what we want to do about it. Ecocide is the crime of mass destruction of the environment and everything that lives in it. Because it's considered on par with things like genocide and torture, there's been a push since the 1970s to put ecocide under the purview of the International Criminal Court at The Hague. And while the ICC has yet to classify ecocide as a crime, there's a growing body of evidence that suggests that it should do so and do it soon. That's because the world's leading climate change organization, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, has concluded that our fossil fuel addiction is leading to environmental destruction that could very possibly mean the end of industrial civilization, maybe even the human race. The IPCC's newest report, which was released today after months of deliberation, paints a devastating picture of the future of our planet. Global warming, it says, will soon lead to a parade of horribles, including the breakdown of global food systems, shrinking water resources, and an increase in violent conflict. A gentle way to say war. In many ways, the nightmare has already begun. For example, a large part of the Arab Spring, from Tunisia to Syria to Egypt, has been climate change-induced drought, radically driving up the price and driving down the availability of wheat and other foodstuffs. Hungry people rise up, and they're doing it all around the world. And this is just the beginning. We could be seeing the same thing in the USA in the next year or three, as both the Midwest breadbasket and the California fruit and vegetable growing areas are both suffering under extreme and severe drought. Meanwhile, over 20 people just died in Washington state because of excessive rain. And let's not forget the hundreds of thousands of people who died over just the past few years from wildly more severe than normal storms, typhoons, hurricanes, and monsoons in places from the Philippines and Bangladesh to mile-wide tornadoes across the center of the United States and Hurricane Sandy. The United States is the lead polluter, the biggest villain in this particular morality play, in part because of our outsized per capita carbon footprint, and in part because our political process has been so badly corrupted by the fossil fuel industry. You could thank Republican appointees in the U.S. Supreme Court for much of this. Ever since Lewis Powell wrote his infamous memo calling for a business takeover of the judiciary, and then Richard Nixon put him on the Supreme Court in 1971, at the Supreme Court, in cases from Buckley v. Vallejo and to Citizens United, the court has made it easier and easier for oil and coal barons to own American politicians. Those politicians then introduce idiotic laws, like the one that Oklahoma Congressman Jim Bridenstine is promoting, that would force the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, to pare down its climate change research. But the corruption of our political system by the fossil fuel industry has real-world consequences outside of just a few bizarro bills sponsored by shills like Bridenstine. As the day goes by, and Congress continues to delay or obstruct doing anything about global warming, we pass climate tipping points that are so severe that once we pass them, people and large parts of our environment die. One of the most dangerous of these tipping points is the one associated with melting Arctic sea ice and the possibility of tundra and seabed methane releases. If we don't do something quickly to stop this, it could soon lead to the Earth's 6th mass extinction. At this point, charging people with ecocide needs to be in the discussion. If the very real threat of an environmental apocalypse as brought up in the IPCC's report doesn't scare politicians into taking action, maybe the threat of prosecution in an international court will. Some people would call that extreme. But when the alternative is the destruction of much of the world's ecosystem, everything needs to be on the table. After all, the future of our planet and our species is at stake. Joining me now is someone who's working on the future of our planet and our species is at stake. Joining me now is someone who's working hard to prevent that kind of environmental devastation. Tom Weiss is president of Climate Crisis Solutions and Ride for Renewables. Tom, welcome.
Good to see you again, Tom.
Great to see you again, too. Welcome back.
Thank you.
The IPCC report came out today. And I've been on the radio for the last 3 hours. I haven't had a chance to actually carefully read it. Yes. I got the highlights, but what's in it? What do we need to know about the IPCC?
A couple things we need to know. We've got over 100 governments now that are saying that climate change risks destabilizing human civilization. And a lot of what they said is, I mean, it's not exactly new information. We've been hearing about these trends coming for some time, but they're stepping up the alarm bells.
Yeah.
And, more and more people are paying attention. And Dr. Pachari with the IPCC, he said, I want to quote him, Tom, nobody on this planet is going to be untouched by the impacts of climate change.
Wow.
And that's new kind of language that we're hearing from the IPCC.
It's sort of like, 25, 30 years ago, they were saying, whenever it started, they were saying, hey, there's something going on. And then 15 years ago, they were saying, we may have a problem. And then 10 years ago, they were saying, maybe this century we'll have a problem. And then 5 years ago, they were saying, we better look at this. And now they're going, hey, you guys!
That's right. That's well put, Tom.
So anyhow, back to what's in it.
That's what's going on. And I mean, what they're talking about, the risks include mass flooding, mass starvation, extreme storms. And we're already seeing this happening, in Bangladesh, here in the United States. We saw it in my hometown of Boulder, Colorado. This is happening all around us. I mean, the only people that are left denying this are some wackos in Congress, and they're Republicans.
And they're taking a lot of money from the oil industry. I mean,
well, they are.
It's really simple.
They are.
You can just go to sourcewatch.org and just see where the money's coming from.
That's right.
So we've got the fossil fuel industry, the oil, coal, and natural gas industry, basically funding politicians and deniers. The IPCC, this is a consensus organization. It requires 100% of everybody to say yes. It's not a 50% vote like the U.S. Congress.
That's right.
So therefore, their statements are always the most conservative possible statement.
That's right. I'm glad you brought that up, Tom.
And yet they got their hair on fire here.
That's right. They do. But you're right.
What are the people saying who are not the conservative tail end? What are the people who are out in the front saying?
I'll give you some. Dr. James Hansen, the most preeminent climate scientist in the U.S., he issued a report, a study back in December with 17 other co-authors.
It was published in Science.
Yes, it was in
Nature.
It was in PLOS One, I think, publication, scientific publication. But they talked about the 2% Celsius ceiling that has been set by the UN as 2 degrees Celsius is the highest that's safe to go.
Right.
He and 17 others are arguing that that's based on politics, not science. They say we should be heading for 1.
And we're already at 0.8 of
We're at 0.8, yes.
But what about this notion that there's stuff in the pipeline that really what we're experiencing right now is the stuff we put out in the 1970s, which means we're really screwed.
Well, we're not necessarily. A lot of the heating is baked in. You're right about that. But Dr. Hansen talks about how if we halted emissions, and we need to get to zero emissions, let's talk about that, right? If we halted emissions by 2015, that would cause carbon dioxide to decline to 350 parts per million by 2100.
Yeah, but you're talking
we could try
worldwide?
I'm talking worldwide, yes.
By 2015? In a year and a half?
Well, he's just stating that.
That ain't going to happen.
No, I don't think 2015 is going to happen. Let's take it the next step. He said if we wait 20 years to get down to zero emissions, then we're going to have a decline to 350 parts per million by 2300. So this
200 years from now.
Yes, that's how much is going to be baked in. So all right. Let's say we can't do it by 2015. Let's say we can do it by 2020. Let's say we can do it by 2030. We need to do it as quickly as humanly possible is the point.
Right.
And, because every, additional bit of carbon dioxide we put into the atmosphere, it's going to be there for a while.
Yeah.
And we're going to pay the price. And our children in the next 7 generations are going to pay that price.
Yeah. If there are 7 more generations.
If there are.
I mean, that's the, you got guys like Guy McPherson out there saying, it's over. It's over. It's toast. And I'm not ready to go there.
I'm not either because I think we can still turn this around. I think there's that's my personal belief.
But I think it's important that there be a few people out there saying this is how bad it could be, or maybe even is. In any case,
I agree, Tom.
We have just a minute left here. Do you think that this IPCC report is finally going to light a fire under some foreign governments? Are we getting any feedback from?
I don't think it. I think it's going to move us incrementally along in terms of lighting fires, but we're not going to have a fire lit until the people mobilize. We need a mass public mobilization.
So we need to stop looking to politicians to solve this, and because the politicians are going to react to the people, we the people need to be.
We've got to drive it, Tom.
Right.
I mean, President Obama's climate action plan is more PR than planned, and has zero chance of stabilizing the climate. So, I mean,
there's 350.org. Your organization, what's the website?
It's rideforrenewables.com.
Rideforrenewables.com. We did this movie. It's over at lasthours.org.
Yes.
There's a bunch of great organizations out there, and most of the big environmental organizations are now starting to make this a major issue. So, and even groups like Public Citizens. So, Tom Weiss, great to have you with us.
Great to be on, Tom.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, it's election time again, and that means Republicans are back to their usual tricks, trying to suppress the votes of millions of American citizens. But could their latest anti-democracy campaign backfire like it did